I just spent 6 weeks traveling through South Africa and Namibia, photographing some of the most incredible wildlife and landscapes on Earth. In this video, I'm going to share the camera gear that I packed on my trip and what works best for me, but I hope it helps you decide on what you might need to pack for your next adventure. A couple quick things to note, this is all just personal preference, there's no one size fits all for camera gear, and this video wasn't sponsored by any of the products that I'm sharing. Let's kick this off with my camera bag. This is the 40-litre One Pro Flex from PGY Tech. And in my opinion, this is the best camera bag for travel, hiking, and splitting your bag between camera gear and other items. I use the large camera cube and think that this is the perfect layout for quick access to my gear. My main camera body is the Sony a7R V, and I absolutely love this thing. With 61 megapixels, it gives me so much flexibility, especially when it comes to cropping. When you're shooting wildlife or fast-moving moments, that extra resolution can honestly save a shot. The autofocus is ridiculous, and the dynamic range is amazing. The image quality still blows me away every single time I open a file. I recently picked up my Sony a7C II as my backup hybrid camera, and it's perfect for exactly that. It's essentially an a7 IV in a much more compact body, which makes it insanely versatile for travel. I use this a lot for video, casual shooting, and as a second body so I don't have to constantly swap lenses. It's super lightweight, easy to carry, and it still delivers incredible image quality. Having two camera bodies on a trip like this made a huge difference. It lets me stay flexible and focus more on what's around me rather than fumbling and faffing around with gear. I will say though that having two camera bodies is not essential, and you can get away with just having one. For lenses, let's start with the Sony 200-600. Let's be real here, you are never going to use this lens at 200mm. It is just human nature. If you have the gear, you're going to zoom all the way into 600 and fill the frame. I'm guilty of it, and I guarantee you'll be guilty of it too. I bought this lens a few months ago and I absolutely love it. I think it's by far the best bang for your buck in a super tele lens that you can get. But the big downside to a lens like this is obviously the size and weight. Packing it into your camera bag kind of sucks, and swinging it around on a safari truck in people's view makes you kind of And with that being said, this thing was pretty much glued to my camera for safari, but there was definitely times I wish I went a little bit wider. Next up is the 70-200 2.8 version 2. This is probably my all-time favorite lens, and I just love the images it produces. The sharpness, the compression, the bokeh, the autofocus, it's all unreal. That said, I honestly wish I used this a bit more on this trip. Now that I'm lugging around a 200-600, this focal length can feel like a bit of an awkward middle ground. But every single time I mount this lens onto my camera, it reminds me why I love this thing so much. Paris actually used this lens a ton on the a7C II and created some insane images, especially in low light conditions. If I wasn't bringing along the 200-600, this would be my main lens without question. I also want to note, wildlife are usually a lot closer to the safari truck than you might think, so don't feel like you're going to miss out if you don't buy a big ass lens. Something around 200mm will absolutely do the trick. Next is a 16-35 GM2. This is probably my least used lens, although I know a lot of travel photographers love it. I often find it a bit too wide, or at least a little awkward for the way I shoot personally. I mostly use this lens for hotels, interiors, wide landscapes, and creative shots in really tight spaces, but it mostly stays on my a7C II for shooting video. But this lens is phenomenal. The size, the weight, and versatility definitely earn this a spot in my camera bag every single trip. Next up is the Sigma 24-70 2.8 version 2. Outside of Safari, this is hands down the lens that I use the most. If I had to pick one lens to travel with, this would be it. It's the perfect balance for being wide enough for landscapes and giving just enough compression for portraits, street scenes, and everyday moments. This lens pretty much always lives on my camera because it's reliable, it's fast, and it's incredibly versatile, which is exactly what I want when I'm trying to tell a full story. For extras and essentials, I try and keep things simple. The Ulanzi zero-wire tripod is my go-to for travel because it's super lightweight, sturdy, and it slides straight to my backpack really nicely. For filters, I use the Helix Maglock from Polar Pro. They do get a little pricey, and I don't love how bulky they can get, but having magnetic, quick lock-on filters is such a game changer. Keeping your gear clean is a must, so I always bring along a ton of these little microfibers, a little dust blower, and a pack of these little full-frame sensor cleaners. For managing storage, I use the RP60 SSD from PNY. They're super fast and reliable, and they're also dust and water resistant. So after all of that, I want to mention overpacking. This is something that I constantly have to check myself on because it's something that weighs me down physically and mentally. I own a lot of gear, and the moment I decide to bring something on a 6-week trip, there's this kind of pressure that I have to use it, and I find that mindset can kind of take away from the experience. And this is where I want to mention bringing a drone. I use the Mavic Air 3, and while I love taking aerial photos with this, there wasn't really many places that I could legally fly. Between the national park restrictions and not being able to fly Namibia at all without a government permit, it ended up seeing very little use. And that leads me into saying more gear or better gear doesn't always mean better photos. Sometimes it just means making more decisions, more weight, and spending more time thinking about what lens to use rather than actually enjoying the experience. So that's my camera setup for my South Africa and Namibia trip, and most likely most of my trips going forward. So if you're heading out on safari or just planning a similar trip, I hope this helps you make some decisions on what camera gear to pack. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.